I was just looking at the introduction, to make sure that that's what I said. My area is EFL, English as a foreign language, and ESL, English as a second language. EFL is usually teaching English overseas. ESL is relates to teaching English as a second language here, although it might interest you that a lot of the distinction between the two are blurred at this point in time. Now, I do a lot of work in different mediums. There are several reasons for this, and I'll explain this as we go on. And this is the title of the research, Oz Behind the Curtain, Online Pedagogy and Practice. It's also the title of a new book that's coming out this spring, and you will see my graduate students and I, with which is hat peeking out or whatever it is. We try to make it fun, but it's serious business because teaching online is work intensive, and there's a lot of resistance to teaching online because of the front loading of the work and other interesting things about online teaching that we might touch base upon. Now, where things are at this point in time, why am I getting involved in this? And in the school that I'm with, the School of Education, we've done this work quite a bit. In fact, when I was hired in 2003 as an assistant professor, I was already teaching blended since then. So my load has always been a blended load for several reasons. But as you can see, at this point in time, 50% of our students are doing online type of work. In public schools, it's vast. When I took my son, for instance, on sabbatical with me, all the work that he did was online, and when he came back, he still wanted to do things online, although he was in town. So, which to me is indicating a new generation altogether in terms of the level of comfort in working online. And the reason I got into this is that I had several funded grant projects, and these projects brought together ESL teachers and content area teachers for joint professional development programs. The reason I bring these folks together is because ESL teachers can learn about teaching about content areas, and content areas can learn about what to do with ESL students. And so the juxtaposition is very important. And when I was doing all these projects, and I'm currently still doing these projects, I wanted to provide professional development that is embedded within the teachers' lives, that is sustained over a long period of time. I did not want to pull teachers out of their schools because that meant a lot of things. They won't be in the classroom teaching, but I also wanted the professional development to be grounded in their realities so that whatever we talked about in the classroom, there's a direct connection, there's a direct assessment of what we were saying in the classroom, in what they were doing in the classroom, that we were there in tandem, quote unquote, with them. This is a tandem certification of Indiana teachers. And so these programs brought me in connection with about 300 teachers in 25 school districts in Indiana. And so we were, the program had to be hybrid. We had to be online, we had to be face-to-face, and we had to be in between. All of that, and we used all those multimodality, as much of it as possible, because we wanted the teachers, we wanted to be working in tandem with the teachers. Now, internationally, of course, we wanted to do the same. We wanted to reach teachers where they are. And in terms of ESL, in the Peace Corps program, our online program is the first online-only Peace Corps Masters International. In the past, they had to do their masters first before they could go overseas, but now, one of our students is here, but now they can do it before, during, and after the Peace Corps service for several reasons, which we won't go in, but it makes it relevant. It gives them a goal too when they come home. And so, significance of pedagogy. I'm not going to talk about this. It's less interesting. There are no cats involved. But, my colleague Thomas Nelson Laird and I did a survey of people who taught online in our school. And the focus was always, what's the new technology that's coming in? How do we use Canvas, for instance, something that's in our minds lately? How do we use VoiceThread when we're talking about online teaching? Questions on pedagogy as reflected in literature and research is a neglected area. People don't talk about pedagogy, right? If you don't talk about pedagogy, you can't answer these questions. Your teaching is more reactive, right? It's like with teaching with policies. Policies rain on you, like technology rain on you. Unless you have a pedagogy and know where you want to go, what you want to do, and the outcomes you're looking for, you'll be pushed back and forth, and the focus will be technology and what you cannot do with it, right? And so we wanted to go beyond that. And so we looked into pedagogy. We asked people questions about, but what pedagogy? What are your thoughts about pedagogy? But at the same time, one of the things that I work with is the acknowledgement that with the online environment is very different. When you teach, you have these three things, these three presences operating: social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence. Social is the engagement, the social relationship. Cognitive is the challenge that you put into the engagement online. Teaching presence, I'm going to talk about there, whatever in a moment. But whatever pedagogy you assume, they have to be enacted within these environments in terms of online teaching. But one of the things that framework allowed us to look at in online teaching is the distinction between teaching presence and teacher presence. That distinction now is clearly important in online teaching, but as well as elsewhere. If you remember the one-room schoolhouse, what a teacher had to do. If you think about online teaching, teaching presence plays a role, and it covers even over teacher presence. Teaching presence is the environment, you said, the organization, so that when students come in, they know what to do, whether or not you're directly teaching them or engaging overtly in discussion. Teaching presence, essentially, when you have your online environment set up so students can work autonomously, so that they are able to engage in a way that's fruitful to them. Whoops, already. And so essentially, what's important here in online teaching is making the distinction between teaching presence and teacher presence, right? If you set up your environment well, your online environment well, you are teaching. Although you're not right there in the classroom, you are present in the sense of what you've enabled students to do, right? And so I'll run through this very quickly. This is an example of a reflective pedagogy and how it's enacted in the classroom, right? And there are reasons here that we won't have to talk about. So these are some of the pathways of practice, right? And so, for instance, if you are enacting reflective pedagogy, how do you do that in an online classroom, right? Do you demonstrate teaching presence and teacher presence, right, in a classroom, in an online classroom? So one of the more common ones is to have these starter roles, and this is the overall framing as to what the roles could be. If you want to go crazy, Kurt Bonkers is a colleague of mine. He's broken it down to so many other roles. But essentially, for instance, if you take the online medium allows you to be reflective, allows students to be reflective. But when you talk about reflective pedagogy, what do you want them to do when they come together? You want to give them a purpose. You give them roles, for example, to engage, right? And I go very quickly through this. Another way to sustain that reflectivity, right? When they come into the classroom, instead of saying, "Hi, I like your comment," right? Or, "That's a good question," that's not sufficient to push the intellectual challenge. So essentially, by having them, for instance, self-code their own responses, and how do they self-code it? And this is actually a framework that's from Garrison, Anderson, and Archer. They can be in exploration mode, which is just throwing ideas together. It starts from triggering, problematizing the situation, and going through exploration. Integration, is pulling ideas together, what they're reading and what they're listening, what they're seeing other people say. I'll have one more point. My research has shown that without teacher presence, direct and timely teacher presence, students never get to integration. They stay at triggering and at the exploration phase, but they never get pushed to these two phases until the teacher comes in and say, "Hey, right, this and that." I'll have to go into what she or he can do, but research has shown that students don't get here until the teacher is present. And so this is another example of what you do when you enact reflective pedagogy in your online teaching. You make transparent your grand design, and you can do that by self-storing. So here is an example of a self-storing. You provide sort of a background as to what's happening, so students know. You have teaching presence here. You're not, telling them to do X, Y, and Z, but students know what's going on in your head as you teach, and you invite them as well to engage. Right? So these are very quick examples of, keeping pedagogy in mind, but enacting it in an environment whereby those three presences are in place, and they are in place in online teaching. Right? Sorry to go so fast. And thank you.